The spaceport on Galoran Prime buzzed with the ordered chaos typical of a military hub, its sky streaked with the contrails of arriving and departing crafts. Amid this flurry, a figure detached from the crowd, a veteran whose very posture spoke of wars weathered and battles won. This was General Xythar, a decorated officer from the distant and battle-scarred planet of Zyphoria. As Xythar stepped onto the tarmac, his four eyes, a trait of his species, scanned the horizon. The air was crisp, tinged with the metallic scent of starship fuel and the electric promise of impending action. His old friend, Commander Lyran, greeted him with a traditional warrior's clasp, their armored hands locking in a brief but firm embrace. "Your arrival brings us honor, General," Lyran said, his voice deep and resonant. "The recruits are eager to hear your tales. They've only known simulations and drills." Xythar's mandibles twitched in amusement. "Let's hope my stories instill in them more than just fear," he replied, his voice a low rumble. Together, they walked towards the military complex, its imposing structures a stark contrast to the bustling openness of the spaceport. Inside the base, the environment shifted. The walls, adorned with banners depicting the insignias of various allied alien forces, muffled the external sounds, creating a cloistered sanctum of impending knowledge and strategy. In the assembly hall, hundreds of recruits from different species, some bipedal, others floating entities or multi-limbed beings, gathered, their attention converging on the veteran. Xythar mounted the stage, his heavy steps resonating through the silent hall. Behind him, a holographic display flickered to life, showcasing the galaxy's most inhospitable planets, Deathworlds that were the subjects of his legendary campaigns. As soldiers of the Galoran Guard, Xythar began, his voice carrying across the crowded room, "You are bound to face challenges that will test not only your physical strength but your mental fortitude as well." His eyes briefly met Lyran's, a silent acknowledgement of battles past that shaped their very beings. "Today, I share with you the lessons from my first encounter with a Deathworld, Sarna V. A planet where gravity pulls at your very soul, and creatures lurk in the shadows, ready to claim it." The recruits leaned in, their eyes wide, as the display shifted to images of a verdant, yet menacing, alien jungle. "This," Xythar continued, his tone a mix of nostalgia and warning, "is where I learned that the greatest enemy is often the environment itself. Prepare yourselves, for these are tales not just of survival, but of adaptation and triumph against the odds." As the lights dimmed further, casting long shadows across the hall, the recruits found themselves transported to Sarna V through Xythar's vivid recounting. It was not just a lecture, it was an initiation into the harsh realities of the universe they were sworn to defend. As the first chapter of his many tales unfolded, the storm of anticipation in the recruits' hearts gathered strength, ready to burst forth into a torrent of courage and curiosity. The room darkened as General Xythar activated the holographic projector, filling the hall with the dense, oppressive jungles of Sarna V, vines thicker than a soldier's arm hung from towering trees, their leaves casting deep shadows that seemed to move with life of their own. The recruits, their faces illuminated by the shifting lights of the projection, watched with bated breath as the image zoomed in on a murky river slicing through the foliage. "Sarna V," Xythar began, his voice echoing ominously through the hall, "was my first encounter with a Deathworld, but it was also where I first tasted the bitter draught of true warfare." The scene changed to a younger Xythar, his armor less scarred and his eyes filled with the fire of youth, leading a small squad of Zyphorian soldiers. They moved stealthily, their movements a testament to rigorous training, yet nothing had fully prepared them for the harsh reality of Sarna V. "We landed in the dead of night, under the cover of darkness," Xythar recounted, hoping to evade detection by the indigenous predators we were briefed about. But Sarna V had other plans. The planet was not just alive, it was awake. A low growl rumbled through the speakers, making some of the recruits jump. Suddenly, the tranquil scene erupted into chaos as holographic representations of Sarna V's predators, a cross between massive felines and reptiles with glinting scales, ambushed the squad. "Our mission was simple," Xythar continued, as the scene showed his younger self orchestrating a defense. "Secure a foothold and establish a forward operating base." But within our first hour on the ground, we were fighting not just for control, but for survival. The holograms showcased a fierce battle, with Xythar and his squad utilizing their environment strategically. They set traps using native flora, which released toxic spores when disturbed. We quickly learned to turn the planet's own mechanisms against itself, Xythar explained, pointing out how his team adapted to use the natural hazards as weapons. As dawn broke, we found ourselves surrounded by the bodies of the fallen, both friend and foe. The scene sobered, the excitement of battle giving way to the grim reality of war. The hologram displayed a younger Xythar, kneeling to close the eyes of a fallen comrade. This was the first of many lessons Sarna V taught us: respect. Respect for the power of nature, for the ferocity of the unknown, and for the fragility of life. The recruits watched as the scene shifted back to the present, the holograms fading away to leave Xythar standing solemnly on the stage. "Many of you will face similar trials," he said, his gaze sweeping over the young faces before him. "You will fight on worlds that seem designed to destroy you. And like us, you must adapt, survive, and overcome." The chapter closed with the recruits reflecting on the stark realities of their future roles. The tales of Sarna V not only served as a warning but as a profound lesson in the adaptability and resilience required of a soldier facing the unpredictable miles of Deathworlds. As the room settled into a focused silence following the intense recounting of Sarna V, General Xythar shifted the holographic projector's settings, preparing the recruits for another tale from his storied past. The atmosphere in the assembly hall thickened with anticipation. The lights dimmed again, casting long shadows that flickered against the walls as if mimicking the uncertain flames of a besieged fortress. "The siege of Vicon," Xythar began, his voice reverberating with a gravity that captured every listener's full attention, "was unlike any battle I had ever faced. Vicon, a planet shrouded in perpetual darkness, its surface cloaked in eternal night due to its dense atmosphere blocking out starlight." The holograms flared to life, depicting a dark, rocky world illuminated only by the eerie glow of bioluminescent plants and the occasional flash of artillery fire. The visuals transported the recruits to the cold, desolate landscapes of Vicon, where visibility was a luxury few could afford. "We were not just fighting an enemy," Xythar continued, "we were battling the planet itself. Navigation was a nightmare. Our equipment failed regularly due to Vicon's magnetic anomalies, and the darkness was suffocating, a constant oppressor that weighed heavily on even the most seasoned soldiers." The scene depicted young Xythar and his troops hunkered down behind jagged rocks, their faces tense in the glow of their weapons' readouts. Sudden flashes of light from incoming fire punctuated the darkness, casting stark, fleeting shadows across the soldiers' determined faces. "Our objective was to hold a critical pass that served as a choke point against the advancing enemy forces," Xythar explained. "If we failed, the enemy would have a clear path to the colonies beyond. Success meant survival, not just for us, but for thousands of civilians." The holographic display showed strategic overlays, with Xythar pointing out troop movements, fortifications, and key engagements. "We laid traps, set up ambushes, and used the darkness as our ally. Every flash of gunfire was both a threat and a beacon, revealing our positions even as we sought to locate the enemy." The narrative deepened as Xythar described a critical turn in the siege, an all-out assault by the enemy designed to break the morale and resolve of his forces. "It was during one of the fiercest bombardments that we learned what resilience truly meant. Surrounded, low on ammunition, and with casualties mounting, my troops showed what it means to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds." The recruits watched intently as the holograms depicted the desperate, gritty resistance put up by Xythar's forces. Silhouettes of soldiers, outlined by intermittent gunfire, moved with precision and unity, embodying the tactical acumen and bravery required under such dire circumstances. As dawn broke, though no sun rose on Vicon, we stood victorious, though not unscathed. The siege taught us the importance of unity, of relying on each other when all else seems lost. The lights slowly brightened, bringing the recruits back to the safety of the assembly hall. Xythar's gaze swept across the room, his eyes locking briefly with those of several recruits whose resolve seemed visibly fortified by the tale. "Remember," he concluded, his voice a firm, reassuring baritone, "the darkness of Vicon, or any such world, is as much a mental battle as it is physical. Master your fear, and you master the enemy. As the recruits dispersed, the lessons of Vicon lingered in the air, a somber reminder of the daunting yet noble path they had chosen as defenders of the galaxy. After the intense recount of the siege of Vicon, General Xythar prepared the recruits for a shift from the bleak darkness of Vicon to another form of sensory deprivation that tested the limits of perception and strategy. The assembly hall dimmed again, plunging the room into a soft, eerie glow that mimicked the setting of his next tale. Krellis, Xythar began, his voice cutting through the thick silence, is a world enveloped in perpetual fog. Here, sight, the sense we rely upon most, betrays us. On Krellis, your ears and your instincts become your best allies. The holographic display sprang to life, showing the mist-covered landscape of Krellis. Visibility was near zero, the dense fog turned every shadow into a potential threat, every sound a possible danger. The recruits leaned forward, squinting at the shapes forming and dissolving in the swirling mists on screen. Our mission on Krellis was reconnaissance, to gather intelligence about enemy installations hidden within its veiled territories. Xythar continued, the mist in the hologram parting slightly to reveal glimpses of an enemy facility as seen through advanced thermal imaging. The challenge was not just to move unseen but to detect and evade the unseen. The holograms illustrated Xythar's team, equipped with heat sensors and sound triangulation devices, creeping through the dense fog. Every step was tentative, every breath measured. The visuals emphasized the intense focus required to operate in such conditions. We moved in near silence, communicating through hand signals and brief, coded pulses sent through our suits, Xythar explained. Each soldier had to be hyper-aware of their surroundings, listening for the faintest disruptions in the natural sounds of the planet, a distant drip of moisture, the subtle shift of the wind. As the scene unfolded, a sudden, sharp noise in the hologram made some recruits jump. The display showed a thermal outline of an enemy patrol appearing unexpectedly out of the fog, their heat signatures glowing ominously through the mist. The fog of Krellis teaches harsh lessons in trust and teamwork. During one critical moment, we found ourselves surrounded, the enemy just shadows in the mist. Our survival depended not just on fighting back but on forming a tight defensive circle, backs together, with each soldier covering a segment of the unseen perimeter. The recruits watched as the holographic soldiers coordinated a retreat, their movements slow and deliberate to avoid drawing attention. Xythar's voice took on a reflective tone. On Krellis, the enemy is not just the one holding a weapon. It's the environment itself, the very air you breathe. It tests your resolve, your ability to remain calm under pressure, and your trust in your comrades. The hologram shifted to show the team successfully evading the enemy, their figures fading into the fog, symbolizing their stealthy withdrawal. Krellis was a victory not of combat, but of cunning and control. It taught us that sometimes, the best strength lies in avoiding conflict altogether. As the lights in the hall brightened, the fog on the display dissipated, leaving the recruits with a clearer vision of their surroundings. Xythar concluded, in your careers, you may find yourselves in environments that blind your senses and disorient your perceptions. Remember Krellis. Remember to listen, to feel, and to trust. These tools are as vital as any weapon. The recruits filed out of the hall, the whispers of Krellis's lessons lingering in their minds, reshaping their understanding of warfare and survival on the galaxy's most hostile planets. As the recruits settled back into the assembly hall after a brief recess, the air temperature was subtly lowered. General Xythar intended not just to tell his next tale, but to immerse the recruits in the environmental conditions that shaped it. A chill crept into the room, mimicking the biting cold of the planet at the heart of the new story. Tundrax, Xythar began, his voice echoing slightly as the room grew colder, is a planet where the temperatures can plunge so low that even the technology designed to withstand such extreme struggles to function. It is a world of ice and snow, where every breath feels like inhaling shards of glass. The holographic projector illuminated the room with images of Tundrax, a desolate landscape blanketed in white, the horizon barely distinguishable from the sky due to the constant snowfall. The recruits shivered, some wrapping their arms around themselves, their breaths visible in the chilled air of the hall. Our mission was to secure a series of outposts that had been lost during a particularly harsh winter storm. These outposts were crucial, not just for strategic purposes but also for research into Tundrax's unique ecology, Xythar explained, his breath forming clouds as he spoke. The hologram showed images of Xythar and his team, bundled in heavy, insulated suits, trudging through snow that seemed to swallow their legs up to the knees. Each step was a battle against the snow's resistance. In the cold, it seeped into our suits, testing the limits of our endurance. The scene shifted to depict a sudden snowstorm sweeping across the landscape, reducing visibility to nearly zero. Tundrax's storms can arise without warning, disorienting anyone caught in them. We had to learn to navigate not by sight, but by instruments and maps memorized long before we set foot on the surface. Xythar paused, allowing the recruits to absorb the severity of the conditions shown in the holograms. On one such occasion, he continued, we were ambushed by a patrol of enemy drones, designed to operate flawlessly in the cold where normal tech would falter. The holographic display illustrated the ambush, showing how the snow distorted the sensors and confused the targeting systems of both the enemy drones and Xythar's team. We could not rely on our usual tactics or equipment. Instead, we used the environment to our advantage. Xythar detailed how his squad used the high reflectivity of the snow to overload the drone sensors with directed light signals. We also learned that the cold, which was our enemy, could be turned against the drones. We lured them into a narrow gorge where the intense cold drained their battery reserves more quickly. The recruits watched as the holograms depicted the team setting up an improvised trap in the gorge, using the natural landscape to channel the drones into a bottleneck where they could be more easily disabled. The frozen wastes of Tundrax taught us resilience, innovation, and the importance of adapting our strategies to the environment, Xythar concluded as the temperature in the room began to rise back to normal. The cold, though harsh, was not unbeatable. It demanded respect, preparation, and the willingness to endure. As the holograms faded and the lights in the hall brightened, the recruits left with a deeper understanding of the complexities of warfare on a Deathworld like Tundrax. They learned that survival was as much about wit and willpower as it was about weapons and warfare. After exploring the icy challenges of Tundrax, General Xythar shifted the narrative to a starkly contrasting environment, the fiery, volatile planet of Ignyx. The recruits found their seats in the assembly hall, the air now growing noticeably warmer, simulating the sweltering heat of a world dominated by lava flows and pyroclastic debris. Ignyx, Xythar began, the light in the room shifting to a deep, ominous red, mimicking the glow of molten rock, is a planet so harsh, so inhospitable, that it's often referred to as a fire world. The ground beneath your feet is never still, and the air you breathe tastes of sulfur and ash. The holographic projector filled the room with the vibrant, dynamic landscape of Ignyx. Rivers of lava snaked through blackened fields of volcanic rock, and eruptions were common, sending clouds of ash and embers into the sky. The heat from the holograms could almost be felt on the skin, causing some recruits to loosen their collars. Our mission on Ignyx was to dismantle an enemy fuel depot that was exploiting the planet's natural geothermal energy, Xythar continued. It was a critical strike, aimed at crippling their supply lines which were heavily reliant on this energy. The scene depicted in the holograms showed Xythar and his team, equipped with heat-resistant armor, making their cautious approach toward the depot. The ground shimmered with heat, and every step raised clouds of fine, scorching dust. The constant threat of thermal vents and sudden lava flows meant that every route had to be planned and then constantly adapted as the landscape changed around us, Xythar explained. Traditional combat strategies were useless here. We had to think creatively, use the environment to our advantage. The recruits watched as the team used remote drones to test the stability of the ground before advancing. They observed how the soldiers used thermal imaging to avoid heat traps and navigate through smoke and ash that obscured vision. A significant moment came when we were ambushed by enemy forces, who were well adapted to the harsh conditions of Ignyx, Xythar narrated. The holograms showed a fierce skirmish erupting amidst a backdrop of glowing lava and dark, jagged rocks. Here, we learned that the natural defenses of Ignyx could be turned into weapons. The general described how his team redirected a small lava flow by setting off a series of controlled explosions. This not only blocked the enemy's advance but also created a barrier that funneled the opposing forces into a zone heavily mined by Xythar's troops. The heat, the fumes, and the relentless landscape tested us to our limits, Xythar concluded as the room began to cool down slightly, the red lights dimming back to normal. Ignix taught us the importance of environmental awareness and adaptation. It showed us how to turn a deadly world into a strategic ally against a formidable enemy. As the recruits filed out of the room, the lessons of Ignix hung heavily in the air. They had learned that even the most hostile environments could offer tactical advantages if approached with respect, ingenuity, and the willingness to endure extreme conditions. After the intense and fiery trials of Ignix, General Xythar shifted the focus to a more somber and reflective chapter in his narrative. The assembly hall was dimly lit, creating a subdued atmosphere that matched the gravity of the upcoming tale. Recruits settled into their seats, sensing the change in tone and preparing themselves for a story that promised deeper emotional undertones. Today, Xythar's voice resonated with a touch of melancholy. I will share with you not just a story of survival against a hostile planet, but also a tale of loss and the hard lessons that come with it. This is about a mission on the jungle world of Frondes Major, a planet teeming with life, yet every bit as dangerous as the barren wastelands of other Deathworlds. The holographic projector illuminated the room with lush, verdant landscapes of Frondes Major. Towering trees with broad leaves, dense underbrush, and the constant hum of alien wildlife filled the sensory display, enveloping the recruits in an immersive experience of an alien jungle. Our objective was straightforward, Xythar continued, the imagery shifting to show his younger self and a team of diverse species, each specially equipped for dense jungle warfare. Recover valuable data from a research outpost that had ceased communication. What we expected to be a simple extraction turned into one of the most challenging ordeals of my career. As the team moved through the thick jungle, holograms depicted sudden movements in the undergrowth and the eerie silence that often preceded danger. Frondes Major is home to flora and fauna that have evolved in extraordinary ways. The plants are as predatory as the animals, and the air is thick with spores that can disorient an unprepared mind. The scene showed a tense moment when an ambush by indigenous creatures, resembling large, camouflaged reptiles, led to chaos. The team was scattered, fighting for survival not just against the creatures but against the jungle itself, which seemed to conspire to trap and disorient them. In the chaos, Xythar's voice grew heavy. We lost good soldiers. Friends who had trained together, fought together, and who depended on each other for survival. The holograms slowed, focusing on a poignant moment as Xythar and his remaining team members regrouped, their expressions a mix of determination and grief. The loss was devastating. It was a stark reminder that no matter how well prepared we might be, the universe can still be unforgiving, he said, pausing to let the message sink in. But from this tragedy, we learned crucial lessons about the unpredictability of Deathworlds and the absolute necessity of adaptability and mutual support. The final scenes depicted the team completing their mission, securing the data from the overrun outpost, and making their way back to extraction. Despite their success, the mood was somber, the cost of their victory apparent on each face. As we left Frondes Major, we carried with us not just the data we had recovered, but also a deeper understanding of the sacrifices inherent in our line of work, Xythar concluded, the lights in the hall gradually brightening. We learned that survival is not just about combat skills or advanced technology, it's about resilience, the will to continue despite losses, and the bond that forms between those who face such trials together. The recruits left the hall in a contemplative silence, each processing the harsh realities of warfare on Deathworlds and the profound impact of loss and camaraderie experienced under such extreme conditions. The air in the assembly hall was charged with a reflective silence as General Xythar prepared to share one of the most personal stories from his illustrious career. The recruits, still processing the emotional weight of the previous tale, braced themselves for another profound lesson, this time focusing on the inner battles that soldiers often face. Today's story, Xythar began, his voice softer yet carrying a firm resolve, is not about external enemies or hostile planets, but about the struggles within one's own mind and body. It's about a battle I fought on Xerxes 3, a corrosive acid rain planet where the environment can break not just your gear, but your spirit. The holographic display painted a bleak picture of Xerxes 3, with its stormy skies and relentless, sizzling rain that hissed as it evaporated against protective barriers. The recruits could almost feel the oppressive, damp air as they watched the simulation of acid rain pitting armor and corroding the landscape. We were tasked with establishing a forward base under these harsh conditions, Xythar continued. The constant exposure, even with our protective suits, took a toll on our equipment and on us. It was during this mission that I sustained injuries that nearly ended my career and could have broken my spirit. The scene shifted to show a younger Xythar, visibly struggling as his suit began to fail, the corrosive rain seeping through and causing severe burns. His team rallied around him, providing immediate medical attention and fighting off the encroaching enemy forces drawn to the commotion. As I lay there, partially blinded by pain, facing what I thought might be the end of my path as a soldier, I learned my most valuable lesson yet, not from my superiors, nor from any tactical manual, but from the resolve within myself and the unwavering support of my comrades. The hologram illustrated Xythar's grueling journey through recovery, highlighting the physical therapy sessions, the slow and painful process of regaining his strength, and the psychological battles he faced in coming to terms with his vulnerabilities. This experience taught me about the resilience of the spirit, Xythar explained. Recovery was not just about healing physically, it was about building mental and emotional strength. I had to learn to accept help, to lean on others, and to face the vulnerability that comes with recovery. The recruits watched as the scene depicted Xythar's eventual return to duty, his determination evident in his every step, his leadership strengthened by his trials. Resilience, he concluded, is perhaps the most critical trait you can develop as a soldier. It is not merely the ability to endure, but to recover and to thrive in the aftermath of adversity. On Xerxes 3, I learned that the hardest battles we fight can often be the gateways to our most significant growth. As the lights brightened and the holograms faded, the recruits left the assembly hall with a deeper understanding of the psychological and emotional dimensions of their chosen profession. They had gained not just a respect for the physical demands of their future roles but also an appreciation for the mental resilience required to face and overcome the myriad challenges of interstellar warfare. After exploring the inner struggles and resilience required in warfare, General Xythar shifted the focus back to a more tangible yet equally daunting challenge. The assembly hall darkened once again, this time simulating the vertiginous heights and perilous conditions of the cliff-laden planet, Oron 6. Oron 6, Xythar started, his voice echoing against the simulated sounds of howling winds, is not a place for those with a fear of heights. It is a world of deep chasms and towering cliffs, where the slightest misstep can mean a fall into oblivion. The holographic display illustrated a breathtaking vista of Oron 6, a planet where massive rock formations rose like jagged teeth against a stark sky, and narrow bridges of natural rock spanned the deep abysses that cut through the landscape. Our mission was to capture a high-altitude enemy outpost perched on the edge of one of these chasms, Xythar continued. It was a strategic point that offered control over a vast territory, but the approach was treacherous, and the enemy was well entrenched. The recruits watched as holograms depicted Xythar and his team, geared with specialized climbing equipment, beginning their ascent under the cover of darkness. The visuals highlighted the perilous nature of their climb, with winds threatening to dislodge them and the constant risk of enemy snipers. As we ascended, every handhold and foothold had to be tested for stability. The smallest rockslide could not only alert the enemy to our presence but could also send one of us falling into the abyss, Xythar narrated, his voice steady despite the tension in the scene. The holograms showed the team navigating the cliff face, moving with deliberate care. Suddenly, a burst of enemy fire shattered the night, and the soldiers pressed themselves against the rock, barely wide enough to offer any cover. Here, above the void, we fought not just the enemy, but also our primal fear of falling. We had to trust our gear, our training, and each other implicitly, Xythar said as the scene shifted to show a particularly intense moment when one of the soldiers slipped, only to be caught by a comrade. The battle escalated as the team neared the outpost. the recruits observed the innovative tactics used by Xythar's squad, employing grappling hooks and cables to swing onto the outpost's platforms, turning the vertical battlefield to their advantage. The battle above the abyss taught us that in warfare, the environment can be both a formidable enemy and a valuable ally. By using the cliffs and chasms of Oron 6, we turn what seemed like insurmountable obstacles into effective strategies against our foes, Xythar concluded. As the lights in the hall brightened and the wind sounds faded, the recruits were left to ponder the dual nature of fear and courage, and how both can play decisive roles in the outcome of a battle. The lesson was clear: mastery of one's environment and emotions under pressure can lead to victory in even the most daunting circumstances. As the recruits gathered for the final chapter of General Xythar's series of tales, the assembly hall was filled with a sense of solemnity mixed with anticipation. Today's story was meant not only to conclude the lessons learned but also to inspire these future soldiers as they prepared to embark on their own journeys. Throughout these tales, Xythar began, standing before the recruits with a presence that commanded respect. You have seen worlds that test the limits of endurance, strategy, and courage. Each story has its own lesson about the nature of conflict and survival. Today, I leave you with a reflection on what these experiences teach us about our legacy as soldiers of the Galoran Guard. The holographic display lit up for one last time, showing scenes from each of the Deathworlds they had discussed: Sarnavi's jungles, Vikon's eternal night, the icy expanses of Tundrax, and the fiery rivers of Ignix. Each image was a reminder of the harrowing conditions and the perseverance required to overcome them. As warriors, our actions build the foundation of our legacy. Each decision, each act of bravery or sacrifice, contributes to the story we leave behind, Xythar continued, his voice imbued with a reflective depth. But our true legacy is not just what we achieve, it is also what we teach others through our experiences. The scene shifted to show a series of new recruits, different faces from different species, each looking determined and hopeful, mirroring the faces in the hall. The knowledge we pass on, the values we uphold, and the courage we